Hey y'all, it's Leslie. Thank you so much for joining me. And I don't know if you can see, where is she? We got amazing Gracie, the Wonder Pup, is down there working on a chew toy. So I felt it really important to address what is going on in the new year. You are undoubtedly going to hear a whole lot of 2020 vision and clarity of sight sermons and things like that. But we we're now just a week into the new year, and more importantly, I believe we have entered into a new season and a new era. And if we don't recognize what the Lord is saying in this season, and we don't partner with Him and submit and co-labor in obedience, then we're going to miss the blessing, and we're going to miss where He is taking us. And I felt Him speaking to me this morning in a message that I felt He wanted to share through Genesis 12 and 13. And it's through the promises that the Lord made to Abraham, at the time Abram, and what we can learn from Abram's response and the delays that happened, and then ultimately receiving the blessing. And this is hopefully encouragement so that we don't encounter the delays. So in Genesis 12, the Lord had said to Abram, "Get out of your country, from your family, and from your father's house to a land that I will show you. I will make you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse him who curses you, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed." Okay, so we have clear instructions from the Lord. Abram's talking directly to the Lord, hearing directly from God, which we can and should do because He's the good shepherd and we're the sheep, and we recognize His voice and we follow Him. And so the Lord gives him clear direction. And He says, "Get out of your country, from your family, and from your father's house to a land that I will show you." In verse 4, Genesis 12:4, so Abram departed as the Lord had spoken to him, and Lot went with him. And Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. Lot went with him. The Lord said, "Leave your family and your home and go to where I will show you." And his nephew tagged along, and Abram let him. So what happens? They're going on their merry way. Abram's got Sarai, his wife. Now he's got his nephew in tow. The whole family, all the cattle, all the herds, all the herdsmen, they're sauntering forth. And we see in verse 10 that there was a famine in the land, and Abram went down to Egypt to dwell there, for the famine was severe in the land. So the Lord had promised Abram a land that he would come into, a land that would be a blessing, the land that would belong to all of his descendants, who would be numerous as the sands in the sea. And yet suddenly Abram finds himself in Egypt, which we know Egypt is a place of captivity, and he finds himself in Egypt during a famine. Then Abram went up from Egypt, and he and his wife and all that he had, and Lot with him to the south. And so we continue to read in Genesis 13 that in Genesis 12, Abram had all sorts of dealings with Pharaoh. There's plagues in the land. He's having to pretend that Sarai is his sister. And finally, after the plagues, Pharaoh says, "Get out, you're bringing all this on us." And so that's when he leaves. And in Genesis 13, he goes up, and again, he leaves Egypt, and he still has Lot with him. He heads to the south. And he went on his journey from the south as far as Bethel, to the place where his tent had been at the beginning. He has now come full circle. He went through Egypt, through the famine, dragging Lot along, and having to deal with Pharaoh and all the persecution, and having to basically be deceptive about his wife to save his own skin. And he went back to the altar which he had made there at first, and there Abram called on the name of the Lord. This is in Genesis 13, verse 4. And we go on to read that as they're there, back where they started, there's strife between Abram's herdsmen and Lot's herdsmen, and Abram is saying, "You know what? I don't want any grief. I don't want any conflict. I don't want any division. Go ahead. you choose where you want to go. I will go to the other place. And so he says, is not the whole land before you? Abram's talking to Lot. Please separate from me. Abram initiates this. He says to Lot, finally, please separate from me. If you take the left, then I will go to the right. Or if you go to the right, then I will go to the left. So what happens? Lot, of course, we know he goes to the cities and he goes as far as Sodom. We know what's going to happen in Sodom and Gomorrah. And so Lot is going to what looks like beautiful plains, what looks like beautiful land, but he's also going precariously close to a place of sin and iniquity and a place that is not under God's covering because it is about to be under God's wrath. And Abram very self-sacrificially takes the other way. He says, you choose. He's willing to lay down. He's willing to submit and humble himself and just take whatever way his nephew doesn't want to go. So he's being very generous. Finally, Genesis 13:14, and the Lord said to Abram, after Lot had separated from him, lift your eyes now and look from the place where you are, northward, southward, eastward, and westward, for all the land which you see I give to you and your descendants forever, and I will make your descendants as the dust of the earth, so that if a man could number the dust of the earth, then your descendants also could be numbered. Arise, walk in the land through its length and its width, for I give it to you. Then Abram moved his tent and went and dwelt by the terebinth trees of Mamre, which are in Hebron, and he built an altar to the Lord. God gives us clear direction, and we are in a new season, and we are in a new era. Psalms, the book of Psalms is the 19th book in the Bible, and I have been very attentively listening to teachings that talk about how Psalms, all of the Psalms, mirror year by year through the 1900s. And if that's the case, then we also know that Psalm 100 represented the year 2000. And Psalm 120, which represents 2020, is the first Psalm of Ascent. And it is the first in a series of Psalms and Ascents. It denotes a transition into a time of blessing, but also, if you read the Psalms, into a time of turmoil, persecution, and God's covering and God's favor. And it is imperative that we listen to the direction from the Lord. And when he says to leave something behind, that we willingly and immediately leave it behind, because the lot that you bring with you is the thing that will keep you from entering into your place of blessing and your destiny. It is the thing that will take you the long way around through the famine in Egypt before you get back to where you started, and then finally part ways with that lot that you've been dragging along with you. That lot could be a relationship. It could be a career path or work that is not God's calling on your life, and you've known that. It could be a mindset. Very often it's a mindset. It's a habit, it's a hang-up, it's an addiction. It is whatever your lot is the thing that God is calling you to leave behind and to follow him and to go where he directs you, because he's pointing you to the promised land for 2020. I hope that blesses you today.